But she thought the alien prisoner only wanted freedom. But she wanted a human who would burn the chains of empires. Their frontier outpost was supposed to be empty. That was why Lieutenant Cale Thorne had taken the assignment, because silence was easier than people, and ruins didn't ask questions. But silence had a way of lying. On the seventh night, while the snow lashed the broken fence lines and the generators stuttered low, Cale heard the sound. A cough. Dry, faint, human, he thought, until he remembered no one else was here. He followed it into the old hangar, rifle braced against his shoulder, breath misting in the dark. Frost glazed the walls, steel doors sagged on their hinges, and in the far corner, beneath the collapsed rib of a raider cage, he saw her. She was chained at the wrists, the cuffs bolted into the rusted floor. Her skin had a faint luminescence, silver beneath the dirt, and her dark eyes glinted like obsidian as they lifted to meet his. Cale froze. His first thought was that she was a ghost. His second was worse, that she was real. "You!" she rasped, her voice cracked with thirst. "Human!" Cale tightened his grip on the rifle. "What the hell are you doing here?" Her lips curved, just barely. Waiting. He should have reported her. Protocol was clear. Enemy species found on military ground were to be cataloged, contained, or eliminated. Instead, Cale lowered the rifle a fraction, scanning the chains, the bruises across her wrists, the way her cloak hung in tatters over her shoulders. "Who put you here?" he asked. Her gaze didn't waver. "Raiders. Years. Maybe more. Time dies in chains." Cale frowned. Raiders weren't known for keeping captives alive this long, and yet here she was, eyes sharp, spine straight despite the weight of rusted shackles. He stepped closer, boots echoing in the cavernous hangar. She tensed, not in fear but like a predator measuring distance. "What do you want from me?" Cale asked. For the first time she smiled. It was a small, dangerous thing. Not freedom to run, freedom to fight. The words hooked into him. Cale had heard pleas before, back in the war, begging for water, for mercy, for death. But never like this. He studied her, the way her breath misted steady, the way her eyes didn't flinch from his rifle. She wasn't begging. She was offering. Cale's gut tightened. He turned, scanning the walls, the broken rafters. There were no footprints leading in or out but his, which meant whoever had put her here hadn't come back, or hadn't lived to. "Tell me your name," Cale said finally. She tilted her head, chains clinking. "Names are chains, but if you need one, Nira." The syllables felt old, carved from stone. Cale nodded once. Nira. That night, he brought her water. He told himself it was interrogation, but when she drank, her throat moving with each swallow, Cale felt something shift inside him. He set the empty cup down, eyes never leaving his. "Why here, human? Why guard ghosts?" Cale leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Because it's quiet. Because no one comes looking for you when you live in ruins." Nira studied him, silent. Then she said softly, "You hide from people. I hide from chains. Same cage, different walls." The words unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Days passed. Cale repaired the outpost's failing systems by day, and each night he returned to the hangar. He should have called command, but each time his hand hovered over the comm, something stopped him. He learned the rhythm of her breathing, the way she moved her hands to keep circulation alive in her bound wrists. He noticed the scars along her collarbone, half hidden beneath the tatters of her cloak, burn marks, precise, deliberate, symbols of ownership. Once when he brought her food, she whispered, "You watch me like soldier, not guard, not enemy." Cale snorted. "Maybe I can't tell the difference anymore." She leaned forward then, eyes catching the lantern's glow. "Then learn. Free me. See what I am." It happened on the 10th night. The alarm screamed, a piercing tone that hadn't sounded in months. Cale bolted upright from his cot, rifle in hand, boots hitting the floor before his mind caught up. Raiders. Through the cracked window, he saw shadows moving across the snow, torches glowing against the storm. A scouting band, 5, maybe 6. Too close, too fast. He cursed, sprinted for the hangar. Nira was already awake, chains taut, eyes burning. "They come for you," she said. Kale slammed the door behind him, heart hammering. "They don't even know you're here." Her gaze didn't waver. "They know. They always know. Raiders smell blood of blood." Kale froze. "What are you?" Her answer was a whisper, fierce and sharp. "The one they couldn't break, the one they fear. That is why they chained me." The door rattled. Voices shouted outside. Snow swirled in through cracks. Kale aimed the rifle, breath steadying. Nira rose to her knees, chains clinking, voice low and urgent. "Free me, human, not to flee, to fight." Kale's finger hovered on the trigger, not of his gun, but of the choice clawing at him. If he freed her, he broke every rule Command had written. If he left her, she would die. The outpost shook under the raiders' blows. Wood splintered, steel screamed. Nira's eyes locked on his, burning in the dark. "Choose." Kale cursed under his breath, dropped the rifle to his side, and slammed his hand against the lock. Sparks flared as he forced the mechanism open. The cuffs snapped loose, clattering to the floor. Nira surged to her feet. For the first time she stood tall, unbound, her presence filling the hangar like fire filling a furnace. The raiders burst through the outer door, and Nira smiled, her teeth sharp in the firelight. "Now," she said, her voice a promise, "we fight." The hangar shook as the raiders slammed against the outer doors, wood splintering, steel screaming under the weight. Kale Thorn chambered around, sweat slick on his brow despite the freezing air. Beside him, Nira stretched her freed wrists, flexing fingers that had forgotten freedom. Her cloak hung in tatters, but her spine was straight, her eyes alive with a dangerous clarity. The door buckled. A jagged blade punched through the gap, tearing splinters free. Voices snarled in a language Kale barely knew, low, guttural, promising violence. Nira didn't flinch. She turned her head toward him, dark hair falling across her cheek, and said one word. "Run." Kale's instinct screamed to hold the line, but her tone, calm, absolute, cut deeper than fear. He jerked his head toward the back. "Service tunnel. This way." Nira didn't hesitate. She followed, chains clattering at her ankles, until Kale cursed and dropped to one knee, snapping the last of the shackles free with a wrench of steel. Her ankles bled where iron had bitten, but she didn't so much as wince. The raiders roared, the hangar door caving inward. Kale fired once into the massive shadows, then bolted down the tunnel with Nira at his side. The service passage was narrow, lined with frost-bitten pipes and rust. Their boots slapped against the ice, breath echoing in the claustrophobic dark. Behind them, the thunder of pursuit grew louder. "Faster!" Kale barked. "I can," Nira shot back, her voice low but strong. She didn't lag, didn't stumble. They burst into the night air at the tunnel's far end. Snow whipped across the ridge, the sky bruised with storm clouds. The outpost loomed behind them, lanterns glowing as raiders swarmed through its broken shell. Nira turned her face to the wind, eyes closed for a heartbeat. "East, forest." Kale didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded, grabbed her wrist, and dragged her into the storm. The forest was a maze of skeletal pines, branches clawing at their cloaks as they pushed through the drifts. Kale's lungs burned, but adrenaline drove him. Behind them, the raiders shouted, their torches cutting bloody arcs through the snow. Nira stumbled once, her bare feet slipping on ice. Kale caught her before she fell, his arm locking around her waist. She steadied instantly, breathing hard but unshaken. "You bleed," he muttered, glancing at her ankles. Her lips curved faintly, despite the chase. "Blood means alive." Kale shook his head. half a laugh tearing through his chest even as fear gnawed him raw. She was either insane or exactly what he needed to survive this. They ran until their muscles screamed. Finally, Cale pulled her into a hollow beneath a fallen pine. Snow piled high around it. He crouched low, rifle ready, while Nira curled beside him, her breath misting. The raiders' torches flickered between the trees, closer, then drifting farther as they searched. Voices growled, but the storm drowned the trail. Cale held his breath, his heart hammering. He could feel Nira's shoulder against his, her warmth strange and steady. Minutes crawled. The raiders moved on. At last, Cale exhaled, shoulders sagging. He turned his head. Nira's face was inches from his, eyes glinting in the dim light. "You saved me," she whispered. Cale frowned. "I freed you. Saving's not done yet." Her lips curved into that dangerous half-smile again. "Then we fight, together." By dawn, the storm had dulled to a white haze. They moved east, deeper into the woods, Cale's rifle slung across his back. Nira walking with silent steps, despite the raw wounds at her ankles. She never asked to stop, never complained, but Cale saw how pale she grew, how each step left a faint streak of blood in the snow. Finally, he grabbed her arm. "Sit, now." Nira blinked, startled at his tone, but when he pointed at a fallen log, she obeyed. Cale knelt, tearing strips from his undershirt, binding her ankles tight. The skin was torn, raw, but she didn't flinch. She only watched him, her eyes unreadable. "You care," she said softly. Cale tied the knot hard. "Don't read too much into it." She tilted her head, studying him. "In my world, no man binds wounds for enemy, only for kin, or bond." Cale froze, his hands stilling on the cloth. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Her eyes burned steady, unblinking. He swallowed hard, then sat back. "We're neither." For the first time, her expression softened. "Not yet." They found shelter in the ruins of an old relay tower, its walls half buried in snow. Inside, Cale coaxed a fire from frozen wood, the flames hissing weak but warm. Nira sat across from him, her face lit by the glow, shadows dancing along her sharp features. She spoke at last, voice low like confession. "You wonder why they hunt me?" Cale met her eyes. "I do." Her fingers brushed the scarred marks along her collarbone. The brands burned deep. "I am blood of chieftain, heir of line they could not crush. Raiders burned my clan, chained me, but still I live. And while I live, hope breathes, that they fear most." Cale felt the words settle heavy in his chest. He had suspected she was more than a prisoner, but not this. Not the last ember of a people. "And you want me to help you light it again," he said slowly. Nira's gaze locked on his. "Not want, need. Alone, I am hunted. With you, we fight. You hold storm in your hands, human. I saw it when you freed me." Cale laughed, rough, bitter. "You don't know me." "Then show me," she whispered. The storm battered the ruins. They sat close by the fire, the silence thick but not empty. Cale stared into the flames, memories clawing back. Battles he'd walked away from, comrades buried in ash. The hollow years that followed. He had sworn never again. Never another war. And yet here he was, sitting across from a girl with fire in her eyes, asking him to stand again. She leaned forward, the fire painting her face in gold. "You have choice, Cale Thorne. Leave me, and I fall. Stay, and we rise." His chest tightened. He thought of the outpost, of the emptiness he'd called living. He thought of her chains clattering to the floor when he broke them. At last, he exhaled. "My fight ended years ago," he said quietly. Then his eyes hardened. "But maybe it's time I chose another." Nira's lips curved into a smile, fierce, certain. She reached across the fire, her fingers brushing his. "Then oath," she whispered. Cale hesitated, then clasped her hand. Her grip was warm, strong. "Your fight is mine now," he said. The words were raw, but once spoken, they felt carved into stone. Nira's eyes glowed in the firelight. She leaned close, her breath mingling with his. "Then chains will break, and with you I will burn the empire." Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the oath burned hotter than fire, sealing two fates into one. Cale Thorne had walked into the hangar, expecting silence. Now he walked out carrying war. And somewhere in the blizzard beyond, the raiders howled in frustration, not knowing the ember they had chained was alive again, shielded by a human who had chosen to fight. Snow muffled everything, but Cale Thorne knew silence was never safety. The forest lay dark beneath the storm, branches sagging with ice. But in the hush between gusts he heard them, the crunch of boots, the faint bark of orders in guttural raider tongue. They were closing in. Cale adjusted the strap of his rifle, eyes scanning the trees. Beside him, Nira moved with uncanny grace, her cloak whispering against the snow, her breath steady. "How many?" she asked, her voice low. Cale raised the spyglass, catching a flicker of torchlight through the pines. "Half a dozen. Scouts." Her lips curved faintly. "Not scouts, hunters. They smell oath. They chase bond." Cale lowered the glass, brow furrowed. "They're just raiders." Her gaze locked on his, sharp and unyielding. "No, they are chain keepers. They will not stop." They found refuge in the husk of an old comm station, its walls half collapsed, roof sagging under snow. Cale led Nira inside, setting his rifle against the doorway, scanning the angles. "We hold here," he muttered. Nira's eyes traced the broken consoles, the shattered glass. "This place remembers war," Cale snorted. "So do I." He scavenged quickly. Wires, shattered panels, fuel cells cracked but not drained. His hands moved with the old rhythm, muscle memory from years he'd sworn to forget. Traps took shape, tripwires stretched across doorways, fuel canisters rigged to shatter and ignite. Nira watched, silent at first. Then she crouched, taking the wire from his hands, braiding it tight with a deftness that surprised him. "You've done this before," he muttered. She didn't look up. "Chains teach. You learn fast or die." Cale glanced at her, at the scars on her wrists, the calm precision of her hands. His gut twisted, anger sparking like flint. By dusk, the snow had thickened, blanketing the world in white silence. Cale crouched by the window slit, rifle braced, while Nira sat cross-legged near the doorway, knife resting across her knees. The forest shifted, shadows moved between the trees. Torches flared. Cale raised the rifle, breath steady. "They're here." Nira rose, her silhouette tall in the gloom, her eyes gleaming faintly in the half-light. "Then chains break tonight." The first raider burst through the doorway. The tripwire snapped. A fuel cell ignited, fire blooming with a roar. The raider screamed, flames eating across his armor. Two more surged in behind him, howling. Cale fired. The rifle cracked, the recoil hammering his shoulder. One raider dropped, skull shattered. The other lunged, blade raised. Nira moved like lightning. She met him with her knife, steel flashing. Her strike was low, brutal, cutting through tendon. The raider collapsed, roaring in pain. Cale reloaded fast, his hands sure despite the years of rust. Another shadow appeared at the window. He shot without hesitation, glass shattering outward. The cabin roared with chaos, gunfire, steel, fire, shouts. But through it all, Cale and Nira moved as if bound by instinct. She flowed where he struck, he fired where she forced gaps. They weren't two strangers anymore. They were survival forged into motion. At one point, a raider smashed Cale against the wall, blade pressing hard toward his throat. Cale gritted his teeth, straining, his arms trembling. And then Nira's hand shot out, seizing the raider's braid, yanking his head back. She drove her knife clean under his jaw, hot blood spraying across the snow. The raider fell, and for a heartbeat, Cale met her eyes. "Not bad," he growled, her lips curved, breathless. "Not bad, human." But the fight wasn't done. The leader of the band stormed in last, a hulking brute clad in patchwork armor, scarred face twisted in rage. His blade was longer than Kale's arm, its edge glowing faint with stolen plasma charge. Kale fired. The shot ricocheted off armor. The raider laughed, swinging the blade in a vicious arc. Kale ducked, barely. Steel screamed against the wall, sparks raining. He countered with a strike of the rifle butt, but the raider caught it, twisting, ripping the weapon from his hands. Kale stumbled back, unarmed. The raider raised the glowing blade for the kill, and Nira was there. She darted in, striking fast, her knife slashing across the raider's side. The blade barely bit, but it drew blood. The raider snarled, backhanding her across the room. She crashed against the console, breath tearing from her lungs. Kale roared, diving for the fallen rifle. He rolled, came up, and fired point blank into the raider's chest. The round slammed through armor, staggering him. Another shot, another crack of bone and steel. The brute fell, crashing to the ground with a sound like thunder. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of dying fire. Kale leaned against the wall, chest heaving, rifle smoking. His arms shook, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Across the room, Nira pulled herself upright, wiping blood from her lip. She crossed to him, slow, her eyes dark but alive. "You fight like Storm." Kale managed a rough laugh. "And you fight like you've been waiting years for it." Her gaze softened, just slightly. "I have." For a long moment, they just stood there, the smell of smoke and blood heavy around them. The firelight flickered against the scars on her wrists, the grit on his face. Nira stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. The touch was light, tentative. "You chose me," she whispered. "Now we bleed together." Kale swallowed, his chest tight. He didn't pull away. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Together." They burned the bodies outside, smoke curling black against the snow. Kale stood watch, rifle across his chest while Nira watched the flames. Her face was unreadable, but her fists clenched tight at her sides. Finally she spoke. "This is first fire. More will come. Empire will not forgive." Kale glanced at her, the smoke stinging his eyes. "Then let them come." Her gaze shifted to him, steady and searching. "You mean it?" He nodded once. "I meant it the moment I broke your chains." Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken weight. Then slowly Nira smiled, a real smile this time, fierce and alive. "Then they will learn, human. Storm cannot be caged." That night they didn't sleep. They sat together in the ruins, the fire burning low, the night outside whispering with wind. Kale cleaned the rifle, hands steady now, while Nira braided her hair with quiet precision. At one point she looked up, her eyes catching the firelight. "When I was chained, I dreamed of fire, not to burn me, to burn them. Now, the dream breathes." Kale met her gaze, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than hollow. He felt purpose. "Then let's burn it all," he said. The storm had passed, but the world still wore its wounds. Charred raider bodies lay frozen in the snow outside the comm station, smoke rising faint from their pyres. Kale Thorne stood silent over them, rifle in hand, the cold searing through his gloves. Beside him, Nira adjusted her cloak, the firelight of dawn glinting faint on the scars along her collarbone. She didn't look away from the bodies, didn't flinch. "This is only first wave," she said. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Empire will not stop." Kale's jaw tightened. "Then we move." They traveled for 3 days east, through forests that whispered with wind, in valleys where the snow lay untouched but for their footprints. Kale rationed what little supplies he had salvaged, dried rations, melted snow for water. Nira ate sparingly, speaking little, but her eyes were always scanning, listening. Sometimes Kale caught her staring at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Not with suspicion, but with something heavier, something he couldn't name. On the third night, as they sheltered beneath an overhang of stone, Kale finally asked, "Where are we going?" Nira's gaze flicked toward the horizon, where the stars burned cold and bright. "To fire that still sleeps. To those who wait." Kale frowned. "Wait for what?" Her eyes shifted back to him, steady as ever. "Me." They found it at dawn of the fourth day. The ruins of an old bunker jutted from the mountainside, half buried in snow. Its steel doors were dented, rust bleeding through, but faint smoke curled from a vent above. Kale raised his rifle, instincts sharpening. "Someone's here." Nira stepped past him without hesitation, placing her palm against the cold steel. She closed her eyes, lips moving soundlessly. Then she knocked, a slow rhythm, 3 beats, pause, 2. For a long moment, nothing. Then with a groan, the door creaked open. Shapes moved inside, lean figures clad in scavenged armor, weapons cobbled from scrap and stolen rifles. Their faces were hard, scarred by years of war. And when they saw Nira, every weapon lowered. "Blood air," one whispered, voice trembling. Kale's grip tightened on his rifle, eyes darting between them. But Nira stepped forward, her presence filling the cavernous space. "I live," she said. Her voice carried, not loud but undeniable. The chains failed. The rebels knelt. Kale stared, stunned. He had known she was heir, but seeing hardened warriors bow as if to a queen, it shook him. Inside, the bunker was alive with fire and quiet industry. Survivors moved through the shadows, patching gear, tending wounds, whispering in awe at Nira's return. Kale sat against a wall, rifle across his knees, trying to piece together what he was seeing. He'd expected a handful of fugitives. Instead, this was the ember of an army. Nira knelt among them, touching foreheads, speaking in low tones. Each man and woman looked at her as if she were sunrise after years of night. Finally, she returned to him, her eyes steady. "You see now," she said. Kale exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I see." She crouched before him, her face close, the firelight catching in her eyes. "They will rise if I rise, but I cannot alone. You know this." Kale looked away, jaw clenched. "I didn't sign up for another war." Her hand touched his arm, light but firm. "No, you chose it the night you broke my chains." His chest tightened. Memories clawed up, trenches burning, comrades falling, the silence of empty years after. He had sworn never again. But when he looked at her, scarred, unbroken, fire alive in her gaze, he realized the truth. He wasn't running anymore. That night, the rebels feasted in their meager way, meat roasted over open flames, rough bread, bitter root drink passed hand to hand. Songs whispered, low filled the bunker, old hymns of defiance. Kale sat apart at first, but Nira drew him close, introducing him not as an outsider, but as ally. "He broke the chains," she said simply, and that was enough. As the fire burned low, Kale and Nira found themselves alone near the edge of the cavern. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by distant song. "You don't belong to them," Kale said softly. "You belong to yourself." Nira shook her head, braid falling loose across her shoulder. "Blood binds, I carry their hope." But she hesitated, eyes meeting his. "Since you freed me, I feel another bond. Not blood, choice." Kale swallowed hard, the air thick between them. "And what choice is that?" Her hand rose, resting lightly against his chest, over the steady thrum of his heart. "You. Storm in chains. Storm unbound." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Kale covered her hand with his own, rough fingers closing over hers. "My fight is yours," he said, voice rough. "Not just oath, not just war. Yours." Nira's lips parted, her breath trembling. Then she leaned close, her forehead resting against his. "Then I am not heir alone," she whispered. The days that followed were filled with steel and fire. Kale trained the rebels, teaching them soldiers' discipline, ambush tactics, marksmanship, how to fight as one instead of many. His voice was iron, his movements precise. They listened. They learned. And through it all, Nero stood beside him. He moved among her people like fire through dark, sparking their spirits. Yet at night, when the bunker grew quiet, she returned to Kale's side. Their silence is heavy, but warm. Once in the dim light, she traced the scars on his forearm, each one a story he didn't speak. "You carry war," she murmured. Kale caught her hand, holding it steady. "Not anymore. Now I carry you." Her eyes shone, but she said nothing. She only leaned into him, her breath soft against his shoulder. But peace was fragile. On the sixth night, the alarm screamed. Old sensors tripped. Scouts rushing in, reporting Empire enforcers on the march. Dozens this time. Not just raiders. Soldiers. The bunker tensed, weapons drawn, eyes wide with fear. Nira stepped forward, fire blazing in her gaze. "We do not hide. Not now. We rise." Kale's voice cut through steel hard. "We fight smart. Traps, ambush lines. Every inch they take, they bleed for it." The rebels roared, the bunker alive with sudden energy. And in that moment, Kale knew the truth. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting to ignite something greater. Later, before dawn, he stood at the edge of the bunker's mouth, rifle across his chest, the cold biting deep. Nira came to him, her cloak brushing the snow, her breath misting in the dark. "They will break upon us," she said. Kale glanced at her, his jaw set. "Not if we break them first." Her eyes softened. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Storm and fire," she whispered. "Together." Kale turned, met her gaze, and for the first time he didn't fight the pull. He leaned down, closing the space between them. Their lips met, brief, fierce, the silence around them burning brighter than flame. When they parted, Kale's voice was steady. "Then let's light it." The mountains groaned beneath the weight of dawn. Snow gleamed faint blue in the early light, sharp ridges cutting against the sky. But it wasn't silence that woke the bunker. It was the steady, growing drumbeat of boots. Empire soldiers. Kale Thorne stood at the mouth of the bunker, rifle braced, watching the dark line of armored figures march through the valley below. Their banners bore the sigil of chains. Their armor gleamed with stolen fire. Beside him, Nira stood tall, her cloak snapping in the icy wind. Her people crowded behind, weapons clutched in shaking hands. Fear whispered in their breaths. Nira's voice cut through it. "Steady, fierce. They come with chains. We answer with fire." A murmur ran through the rebels, fear sparking into defiance. Kale raised his rifle, his voice iron. "Hold the line. Make them pay for every step. And when they fall, don't stop until no chain remains." The rebels roared, and the valley trembled with their fury. The first clash came with thunder. Explosives hidden in the snow lit the front ranks ablaze. Screams tore through the morning as soldiers stumbled, their neat formation as breaking apart. From the ridges above, rebels loosed fire. Rifles cracked, arrows tipped with stolen plasma shrieked through the air. The Empire staggered, but they did not falter. Armored enforcers surged forward, shields raised, voices chanting in harsh unison. Kale led the charge. He moved like storm, rifle blazing, boots pounding across the snow. A soldier lunged. Kale slammed his shoulder into him, blade flashing, blood spraying. Another came. He dropped low, firing point blank, the recoil slamming through his arms. Around him, chaos raged, rebels screaming, steel clashing, snow burning black with smoke. And through it all, Nira was fire incarnate. She leapt into the fray, her knife flashing, her voice a clarion cry. Where she fought, rebels rallied, their fear drowned in her presence. Chains had marked her once. Now she shattered them with every strike. But the Empire had brought more than soldiers. From the ridge above, a war beast roared, an armored construct, half machine, half creature, its eyes burning with plasma light. It charged, tearing through snow, scattering rebels like leaves. Kale cursed, firing into its flank. The rounds sparked harmlessly against reinforced hide. The beast roared, jaws wide, until Nira darted forward, agile as lightning. She scaled its side, driving her knife deep into the seam between plates. Sparks screamed. The beast thrashed, but she clung tight, ripping steel free. "Kale!" she cried. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted, snatched a fallen grenade from the snow, and hurled it into the wound she'd torn open. The explosion ripped the beast apart in a thunderclap, fire blooming against the sky. Nira tumbled free, landing hard, breath ragged, but alive. Kale was there in an instant, hauling her to her feet. "You're insane," he growled. Her lips curved, fierce even through the blood on them. "You're worse." But the battle was far from over. The enemy commander strode forward now, towering above his soldiers. His armor was obsidian black, etched with chains. Across his back burned a weapon, a blade forged of plasma, its edge humming with lethal heat. Kale felt every rebel's fear crash against him. The commander was no raider, no scout. He was the chainmaster, the one who had ordered Nira's clan broken. Nira's breath caught, her eyes burning. "Hearken." Kale glanced at her. "You know him?" Her jaw tightened. "He chained me, burned my mark, thought he broke me." Kale's grip on the rifle hardened. "Then we end him." The fight came like a storm. Harkin moved with impossible speed for his size, plasma blade cutting arcs of fire through the air. Rebels fell before they could even raise their weapons. Kale charged, firing, but the commander deflected each round with a sweep of his blade, sparks spraying. The rifle clicked empty. Kale tossed it aside, drawing his knife. Steel against plasma, a fool's duel. But he didn't hesitate. Harkin swung. Kale ducked, the blade searing inches above his head. He rolled, slashing low, sparks flying as his knife scraped armor. The commander kicked, sending Kale sprawling across the snow. Pain ripped through him. Nira cried out, rushing forward, but Harkin backhanded her, sending her crashing to the ground. Kale's vision blurred. Blood filled his mouth. But when he saw Nira struggle to rise, defiance burning in her eyes, something inside him snapped. He roared, surging to his feet. The fight turned brutal. Kale moved with raw, desperate fury, every strike fueled by grit and rage. Harkin struck him again and again, plasma blade searing flesh, armor cracking. But Kale refused to fall. He was human, fragile, bleeding, but he was unbreakable. At the last moment, as Harkin raised his blade for the kill, Nira hurled her knife. It struck true, embedding deep in the gap of the commander's helm. He staggered, roaring in rage. Kale seized the opening. He slammed forward, driving his own knife clean into Harkin's throat, twisting hard. The chainmaster fell, blood steaming against the snow. Silence crashed over the battlefield. Rebels raised their weapons high, voices thundering in victory. The Empire line broke, soldiers fleeing into the mountains, their wills shattered with their commander's death. Kale stood gasping, blood streaming from his wounds, the knife still clenched in his hand. Nira stumbled to him, catching his arm. Her eyes glistened, her voice trembling. "You fought like storm, like fire. You broke him." Kale met her gaze, his chest heaving. "No, we broke him." For the first time, her composure cracked. Tears cut down her cheeks, mixing with blood and ash. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. "You freed me," she whispered, "not just from chains, from being alone." Kale's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close despite the pain. His voice was low, steady, meant for her alone. "Then let's never be alone again." The rebels gathered, voices rising, songs echoing through the valley. They carried their dead with honor, their wounded with care. But their eyes, every single one, burned with something new, hope. Nera stood before them, her hand clasped in Kale's, her cloak torn, her face scarred, but her presence blazing. "I am air," she declared, voice carrying through the cold air. "But no air rises alone. Chains break because we break them. Fire burns because we carry it together." She lifted Kale's hand high. "This human broke my chains. Now we break theirs." The rebels roared, the mountains trembling with their cry. That night, Kale and Nera stood on the ridge, watching the stars burn above. Smoke curled from the battlefield below, but it was not defeat. It was the funeral pyre of chains. Nera leaned into him, her hand warm in his. "What comes now?" she asked softly. Kale gazed at the stars, the weight of choice heavy but welcome. "Now, we burn the empire, one chain at a time." She smiled faintly, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then we are not storm and fire alone. We are future." Kale tightened his arm around her, his voice quiet but certain. "Together."